Hello and welcome to the Clean Energy Pod, powered by SSE, your guide to the people and technologies delivering the clean energy revolution. On today's episode, we hear from Alyssa Gilbert, Director of Innovation at the Grantham Institute for Climate Change, an expert on all things clean tech. On today's episode, we'll find out what's hot in the industry and what trends will dominate clean technology in the years ahead. Let's get started. Alyssa, thank you very much for joining us on the Clean Energy Pod. You're Director of Innovation at the Grantham Institute. Tell us what that entails as a job.
Well, so I work at the Grantham Institute, which is an institute at Imperial College, which is a university. And my role as Director of Innovation is to work with academics, students, and other people in the university who might have solutions that can help us tackle climate change or other environmental issues. And those solutions have a commercial prospect. So they could be something that they could make into a product or a service to make money. And I help them take those ideas or the skills that they have, develop them further to make a difference in the world.
This is climate tech.
This is climate tech.
So just explain what climate tech is then. Give us a couple of examples.
So in broad terms, climate tech is anything that can help us tackle climate change, which means it can do one of two things mainly: help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions, so the emissions that we release when we burn fossil fuels, or help us manage the changing climate as we see ahead of us. So that's called adaptation. So managing changing heat or changing rainfall patterns. The kind of things that we see are really, really varied. They can be ways that we can use fuels more efficiently. They can be ways that we can generate renewable power or use renewable power more efficiently. They can be hardware, so something new, a piece of equipment, but they can also be software that helps us do things more efficiently. They can be a new material that's an alternative to cotton that you could wear. They could also be something that you never see, like a battery that's used by a power company. So there's a huge range of kinds of technologies and solutions that we see.
Now, we hear an awful lot, and we talk an awful lot on this pod about the electricity sector, for instance, where we all know about offshore wind, for instance, which is doing well and has innovated quite a lot over the last 10 or so years. And there's an awful lot of focus on the power sector, which has helped decarbonise quite significantly. Is that where a lot of the innovation is, because it seems to have done quite well, or are there other areas of the economy that you're seeing coming up?
So I would say that we've been doing this for about 12 or 13 years, some kind of clean tech innovation, and we are not sector specific. And over those years, we've supported around 200 companies, and they group across all sectors of the economy. So there are a lot in the energy sector, energy more broadly, but that includes the power sector. But we also see a lot in transport, a lot in materials, chemicals, heavy industry, and a lot in the waste sector as well. So there's a really broad range.
So if you were looking at what the hot sectors are at the moment, then what would you be telling people?
Yeah, so what I find interesting is that there's definitely fashions in the technologies that people bring. There's a lot of people out there interested in solving these problems and applying their skills. And they'll just, whatever's just inspired them will come in. So a few years ago, people were talking a lot about plastics, and we got loads and loads of solutions that were alternatives to plastics or using things like algae or seaweed. More recently, we've seen a lot of interesting new alternative materials. We've seen a lot of things that are alternative processes for producing ammonia, which is quite interesting because the Haber-Bosch process, which is a technical process that is used to make ammonia, is very energy intensive. And it's really important in creating fertilizers on the one hand, but also ammonia has potential to be used in energy supply chains if you're going to use hydrogen as an energy source. And so producing ammonia with less harm to the environment is really interesting, and it's really technically difficult. And we've seen that's something that we've seen a lot of recently. The other area that's got a lot of interest recently is the area of greenhouse gas removals. So in addition to trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions we have, if we don't do that quickly enough, we want to find ways to pull greenhouse gas emissions out of the air or also out of the oceans, and then store them safely for a long period of time. And we're seeing lots of innovative new approaches to trying to do that.
And who's developing this stuff then? So who are the people actually trying to solve these problems? Are these large corporations you're working with who are working on, big solutions that involve millions and millions of pounds or dollars to develop? Or are these somebody who's, sitting in a garage thinking, I've got a good idea and I want to make a difference?
So really more the latter than the former. So working at a university, the role that we play in this ecosystem is bringing new ideas out that are basically startups. So it's really important to us that we do work with big corporations because it's important for those usually individuals or small groups of individuals that could be staff or student or alumni from our university or from other places. It's important that they connect with bigger businesses so that they can understand what their supply chain looks like, who will buy or who will use their products and services. Because you can have a great initial idea, but you do need to tweak that so that it can be really taken up as quickly as possible. But we're working with, a lot of individuals. Some of those people will be someone who's done a PhD study. It might be an academic in the university who has an idea, but then someone else picks it up. We also have a lot of students, undergraduates, people even in their first year of studying who want to be an entrepreneur, and they hear what they're doing on their course. They come up with ideas. So all kinds of people. And I would also add to that, we've done a new program this year working with some local communities, and some of the people that we work with on innovation are members of the community who actually see how they can apply innovative ideas within the places that they live or the people that they work with. And so you don't just have to be a university graduate to be able to do this.
I was going to say, so a lot of people watching this might work in the energy industry, for instance, rather than be in an academic setting, and they might see a very clear problem in front of their eyes. They might have a solution to that. So what are the tips that you can offer them from, your PhD students? Presumably the system of the process of getting something from an idea to commercial development. Doesn't really matter whether you're a student or whether you're somebody working in the industry or somebody in the community. What if somebody who's watching this thinking, I've got a good idea, but Christ, that looks like a bloody complicated system. What's your advice?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that I would say to do. First of all, your idea is great. And what you now need to do is two things. First of all, think about who the idea is useful for. Whose problem are you solving? And also who will pay for it? Those two things. And then speak to some of those people. And don't be afraid to share your idea with those people. Because what we find is, all right, you have to keep some of your IP to yourself, but actually sharing your idea with people is what will help you make it better. And it's not just the idea itself that matters. It's the delivery of the idea that matters. Execution really is everything. So that's the first thing. Figure out who it's useful to and understand their perspective and modify it. The second thing, and this really is really important to what we call the intrapreneurs. So entrepreneurs are people who are like these student startups or academics. They're outside a company. But intrapreneurs are people in companies who have solutions that can help the company. So the second piece of advice is look for allies. Understand in your own organization where creativity goes. And what are the structures within your own organization that can help support innovation? Most big companies want to be innovative and they want to capture those innovations. And there will be people in your organization who can help you with that journey. So find those people and find out what the avenues are within your organization to make it happen.
Hello, let me interrupt you for just 1 second. It's really important, if you can, to like, comment or subscribe, because it helps more people get access to the information in this podcast, which we hope you're finding valuable. And one of the criticisms in the UK has been, really good at the idea generation, really good at the academic robustness around that, but actually not so fantastic at commercializing that at scale. Is that a problem you recognize, or is that kind of a stereotype that's out of date now?
So it's something that we actually do try and work on actively. Being kind of a world-leading university in the UK, we absolutely want to try and crack open that stereotype. So there are a few things that we think are important here. One is very often people will think of innovation as being a technological problem, but often the problem is the business side of it. And so what we try to bring in is as much as possible is business mentorship and perspectives on the business journey and people who've done it before, because that's the thing that will help you take that great research that you spoke about and actually ensure that it can have impact in the business world. The second dimension to this is interacting really well from early on with investors and trying to understand and work with investors to understand your journey in business growth terms so that you can see the pathway, not just to getting to the next step, but to growing a really super successful commercial business. And understanding that journey from the beginning and then being motivated to pursue that journey is really important. That's something we try to do. And I think there's a third dimension that people kind of describe as a cultural dimension. If you speak to people in some parts of the world where that's a commercial motivator, people are thinking big. And what we, in climate tech, people refer to this as a kind of gigacorn, the solution that will reduce a gigaton of carbon emissions and will also make you a zillionaire, right? We need to also have examples of those or motivate people to think big like that.
So how do we fix that then? Is it just more projects or more courses like you're running, or that's only ever going to be for a relatively small number of people? How do we fix this more systemically across the UK?
So one thing that we're trying to contribute to through the work that we do that I think is really important is what we call like building the ecosystem. So quite often bringing together this group of people who might be people from large corporations, the investor community, some of those exciting and growing startups, the academic community as well, and bringing those people together and so that they feed off each other and see this progress and get excited about it. So with sharing of problems, sharing of solutions, sharing of understanding where the finance is and those growth pathways, bringing in those policymakers, getting the politicians, some of our newer politicians excited that this is a route to prosperity and growth, as well as helping us tackle some of our most pressing environmental challenges.
So somebody is sitting at home watching this thinking, right, I'd love to do that. And I see Elon Musk or whoever I see, and I think I would love to be, running some mega corporation. And I want to go and tackle a really big problem in a really big market. What are the really big problems in the really big markets I should think about?
Okay, so the really big markets are in sort of Southeast Asia and in Africa. These are parts of the world with growing populations, growing needs, and the same kind of challenges that we have now with decarbonization and possibly significantly more severe challenges with dealing with the changing impacts of climate change. There's just a ton of problems there, loads and loads of people.
But if I'm sitting in the UK, it's like, well, that might be a problem there, but I don't understand it.
Well, I mean, that could also equally be true of problems in the UK, right?
Yeah.
Whichever the problem space is you want to enter,
yeah.
You've got to spend your time trying to understand it, right? So, bring your own strengths to it, obviously. But those are the kind of larger problems. We have, significant challenges in reducing the greenhouse gas emissions associated with industries that require a lot of energy to make things happen. And we also need alternative materials, particularly chemicals. So we have a lot of chemicals that we use that come from the fossil fuel industry. And if we do want to move away from fossil fuels, we have to think beyond just power and think about how are we going to get those things that we use every day, those things that are made out of plastics, or some of our fertilizers and so on. What are we going to be using and how are they going to be produced? Have lots of challenges in the agricultural sector as well. So whatever you do, if you're interested in this, something that can be applied.
So here I am. I've got an idea. I've clear idea. I've talked to potential customers. I can go speak to universities like your own, get some advice, and then, but I'm still working my day job, and I've got to get funding for this idea. Is there a funding environment here in the UK that will allow startups to actually make real progress at pace, or is it all a bit sluggish?
We've got quite a lot of good funding, particularly at that early stage when people have ideas. So there's lots of different kinds of funders. Some of them are called angel investors or family offices. These are people who maybe have their own smaller amount of private wealth and they're interested in applying it now to tackling these problems. And they're looking for good ideas to put their money into and to build relationships with people with those ideas. They're quite a wide range of varied kinds of people. And those people are kind of ready to make those initial investments and take a risk on new people. When I said earlier that we work a lot with startups, it's not only students. We often get people who have had 20 or 30-year careers. They're bringing real industry experience. And then they have their idea and they're like, now's the moment. Now, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Now I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So then the kind of obvious question is, how do you find these funders or how do you make sure that they find you? And there's an increasing number of competitions, like early stage competitions that are out there. And these are almost ways for people to find those ideas. No, they're not for people to take advantage of you. They're an opportunity for you to get that first kind of award or recognition that will help you then be seen by potential funders. And then there's also a technical track. So Innovate UK actually has some grants for developing your technical idea. And that may mean that you have to team up with an academic institution or expert, but that's probably advisable. If you have something that needs that level of technical know-how, then it's advisable to go down that route. And do reach out. It's a community that's amazingly collaborative, the climate tech community. So reach out to organizations like ours or reach out to academics with your ideas. Again, you don't have to give it all away, but just say you're interested in having a conversation. I think you might be pleasantly surprised at how collaborative the sector is.
When you're thinking about startups and some of the people you've worked with, who's done it well, or what are the kind of attributes of somebody who's been relatively successful?
So the people that are successful that we see are people who have a lot of drive and persistence, but they're also flexible and they're able to listen and learn. When people come to our program with an idea and they seem like no matter what we say, they're going to stick rigidly to that idea, then we're very concerned about their ability to succeed. Almost everyone has to change their initial idea to some degree. And they have to go out and speak to potential customers and understand what will really land. What can you even make at scale? What will people buy? How should you start? And, it's great to have a vision. You should have a vision, but you also really need to be able to listen and be flexible.
We also talk on this podcast quite a lot about policy and how we get a policy environment that can speed up the transition to a clean energy system. Do we have a policy environment here in the UK which is conducive to helping startups? We hear an awful lot of talk, for instance, in funding about how do we release cash and pension funds to help fund startup businesses. But it does seem as if, if you look at tech, not just climate tech, the US is very aggressive on this. It's got a very established market. There's a whole, policy and culture there. Do we have a similar policy and culture here, or does something need to change?
It's pretty good, actually. There are things that are really good about it. So we have schemes for people to use their private wealth at the beginning of an investment, at the early stage of a startup. And there's some schemes that already exist there that help encourage people to make innovation investment. And
is that, when you talk about private wealth, that's just somebody who's got cash and they're willing to take a high risk, essentially, in the hope of a high reward? Or is it somebody who's thinking, you know what, I think we should solve this problem and I don't mind burning some cash if I have to burn some cash?
It's both of those things. So there are people who want to, who want to see a financial reward, but there are also people who have wealth and they are really concerned about this problem. And those people are actually willing to take quite high risk. And they may well actually see reward out of it, but they're actually also willing to take a loss. So we have some aspects that are good. And I think what's really important in the climate tech space that we've had for a long time in the UK, and I think is now set to continue, is a real commitment to tackling the problem of climate change at home. And what that means is we have an environment where people can test their product. And it means that people do want to start their businesses here. We obviously have some businesses of the companies we've supported, around 200. They operate in about 30 countries. So not everyone stays in the UK. And you can see, someone
That's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, they don't always start in the UK. We do want them to go internationally. Some of them are very heavily based on, solar technology, and they're like, I'm going to start in the Mediterranean. Well, I can understand that.
Makes sense.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But a lot of people choose to start here when they're trialing things because we've had a consistent cross-party commitment to tackling climate change, and that means that policy side of things is consistent, and they can then test their technology. They know that they'll get traction, and that's also supported by how the public feel about tackling these problems. So you've got this dual aspect: the funding, the sort of policy towards innovation funding and enabling people to use their wealth to take risks is important, but it's also equally important that you have the policy landscape that means these technologies can be used and there's incentives for people to use those technologies.
You've talked about working with 200 companies. Do you have to be an engineer to make an impact in climate tech, or do you have to be an established scientist to make an impact in climate tech?
No, not at all. In fact, many of the solutions that we need to use to tackle climate change, we already have. We already have the technology. The thing that we don't have is the business model to get it implemented. The sort of most common example we use is energy efficiency in our homes. We've got lots of good materials and good building processes and a good understanding of building design. We could have a much better housing stock in the UK and commercial buildings as well that wasted less energy and were pleasant to live in, high quality housing. And over the lifetime of you living in your house or running your commercial building, it makes cost sense too to do that. But somehow the way in which the construction sector works and the way in which those materials are sold, we just haven't cracked. For decades, we just have not cracked getting that kind of group of solutions that can make our buildings more efficient into the building sector. And so, people can come with a strong business background. We need people with a strong business background to create the business models to get those products out there.
And you're very enthusiastic about this. Why, given the scale of the problem that we have? Is it just because of the people you're meeting and working with, or is it because something you're personally passionate about anyway?
Well, I'm just an optimist, so I think that, it's a difficult problem, but I kind of believe in humanity to solve it, right? So that's why I'm kind of passionate about it. It's also really interesting. We have such a range of solutions. We had someone making environmentally friendly sequins that appeared on the cover of Vogue. I never expected to be working at a university on technology and for it to appear on the cover of Vogue. And at the same time, we have these really deeply interesting new approaches to catalysis, so deeply chemical processes that are just completely fascinating. So it's always varied all the time. And you see the energy and the passion of all the kinds of people who want to work in this sector. I've constantly contacted by all kinds of people who would like to get into the sector. And that also makes me feel positive that there's so many people out there who want to contribute to this solution area.
And when we talk about how we can tackle climate change, it's clearly a very big problem. But one of the tensions sometimes is how much should it be behavioural change? What we can do ourselves to change our lifestyles to help impact that. And then some others would say, actually, the human spirit leads to a lot of innovation. We'll be able to solve this with technology without bothering people very much. Where do you lie on that spectrum?
I think those two things, technology change and innovation and behaviour change, are more integrated than people really consider them to be. So once you have a technology, someone has to choose to use it. Now, you could call that behavior change or something else, but if you don't make the choice to use the technology that's on your doorstep, creating a new technology is not going to solve it. So there are some things that people describe as behavior change that might be a more significant lifestyle choice. Some people choose not to eat meat. Some people choose not to fly. Those are quite significant. But I think the most important changes are just choosing to use a new technology or choosing to care that your house is leaky. And if you can afford to do so, changing the windows. The choice of vehicle that you drive. That's a behavior change to choose an electrical vehicle or a cleaner vehicle in some way. So many of the things that you might consider behavior change are also adopting new technology. So new technology is great, but how can we be excited about and adopt new technology? And again, some of that is in the work that I'm doing with some of these climate tech founders. What I love the most is when someone comes with a solution that not only is interesting and solves a problem, but is beautiful and attractive and easy to use, intuitive, because actually that's what we need. We don't just need new technology. We need things that entice people, make it easy for people to use.
Let me interrupt for just one more second. What do you think? Give us your views. We're all learning as we go through the clean energy revolution. Leave your comments, give us a like, or share with one of your colleagues. Let's skip ahead then. So you're talking to all these companies, all these founders, all their exciting ideas. You can clearly see what the problems are. What's the world going to look like in 5 or 10 years' time then? What if you're thinking of tomorrow's world, we wouldn't hold you to this, but if you're thinking of tomorrow's world, how do you see people's lives change, technology helping people's lives change and make a positive impact on climate change?
So I think that, we will be used to, in the UK, the default that things are mostly electrified. So this idea that you could have an EV now will just be completely different. The idea of filling up your car with a fuel at a pump would just be completely anathema. In fact, I think that we have to think about the integration between climate tech and other changes that we're going to expect to see. So increased digitization of things. I often think that possibly a waste of time for my children to get a driver's license, because I think we might see that the future of transport in the most modern cities should be more like logistics of passenger transport. People will travel. Maybe you could get in your private vehicle as a family and no one will be driving. And that vehicle will be much more environmentally friendly and we'll be used to that. I think it will be much more commonplace, even more commonplace than it is today, for people to have sustainable diets and more varied diets and healthier diets. And hopefully our homes and our workplaces, our homes often as our workplaces, will be places that have a better thermal level of comfort and are also, healthier environments. And I hope that will be something that will be true for people of every socioeconomic group. And I think that, people's jobs might be quite different in different parts of the UK. But I'd hope that in places where people have jobs now that relate to the fossil fuel industries, they'll have different kinds of jobs in the same places or places that they like to call home that may relate to, greenhouse gas removal, which I mentioned before, or producing products of heavy industry materials that might be new materials, but again, in clusters that we're familiar with and proud of as being part of industrial heritage in the UK, but that might be producing brand new things and world-leading materials.
And that just reiterates, I suppose, the importance of technology and innovation in this stuff, because it'll be far easier to change your life if your life is easier because of technology. It's easier to get a car, it's easier to move. There's an attractive job where you can, look your kids and grandkids in the eye and say, I'm part of the solution. All that sort of stuff kind of does rely on technology to some degree. And that's why it's so important about whether we have the right culture to kind of deliver these technological changes.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that people get excited about technology, and that's kind of the thing that we should hang on to. People are excited about technology and also love nature and beauty and the environment of nature, and how we can combine those two things for everyone's enjoyment is really important.
Alyssa, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for joining us. That's all we have time for on this episode. But if you found anything in it valuable, please like, comment, or subscribe, or even better, share with one of your colleagues or friends. See you soon.